The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, sat quietly in her private study. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the medical report that would change everything. The words on the page seemed to blur together, but one phrase stood out clearly: requires immediate attention. She had been feeling unwell for weeks, but like many mothers, she had pushed her concerns aside, focusing instead on her royal duties and caring for her 3 children. Prince William was in his office down the hallway, preparing for a series of meetings about his environmental initiatives. The couple had developed a routine over their years of marriage. They would start each day with coffee together, discussing their schedules and sharing quiet moments before the demands of royal life took over. But today felt different. Catherine couldn't bring herself to leave her study. The weight of what she had just read felt overwhelming. When William finally found her, she was staring out the window at the palace gardens where their children often played. He could sense something was wrong immediately. After 13 years of marriage, he knew his wife's every expression, every gesture. The way her shoulders were set, the distant look in her eyes, it all told him that whatever was troubling her was serious. "Kate?" he said softly, using the name he had called her since their university days at St. Andrews. "What's happened?" She turned to face him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. Catherine had always been the strong one in their partnership, the steady presence who handled public scrutiny and royal protocol with grace. Seeing her this vulnerable shook him to his core. Without saying a word, she handed him the medical report. As William read, his face grew pale. The diagnosis was clear, and while it wasn't life-threatening, it would require surgery and a long recovery period. More importantly, it would mean stepping back from her royal duties indefinitely. For someone who had dedicated her life to serving others, this felt like losing a part of herself. "We'll get through this," William whispered, pulling her into his arms. "Whatever it takes, we'll face it together." But Catherine's mind was already racing ahead to all the implications. Who would take over her patronages? What about the early childhood development work she was so passionate about? How would they tell the children? And perhaps most daunting of all, how would they tell the public? Every aspect of their lives was scrutinized by the media and the public. A health scare would dominate headlines and fuel endless speculation. The couple spent the next hour making calls to the most essential people in their lives. First, they spoke with King Charles, who immediately offered his full support and suggested they take all the time they needed. Then they called Catherine's parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, who had always been a source of strength for the family. As the day progressed, William watched his wife struggle with the decision of how much to share publicly. The royal family had always maintained a careful balance between transparency and privacy, but this situation felt different. Catherine's work had touched so many lives, particularly in mental health awareness and early childhood development. She felt she owed it to the people who supported her to be honest about what she was facing. "I keep thinking about all the families we've met," Catherine told William as they walked through their private garden that evening. "The mothers who have shared their struggles with me, the children who have opened up about their fears. How can I ask for privacy when I've encouraged others to be open about their challenges?" William understood her dilemma completely. Throughout their royal journey, they had both learned that their personal experiences could be powerful tools for helping others. When William had spoken openly about his struggles with grief after losing his mother, it had helped countless people feel less alone. But this felt more complex because it involved Catherine's health and their family's immediate future. That night, after putting George, Charlotte, and Louis to bed, they sat together in their living room and began drafting a statement. They wrote and rewrote it dozens of times, trying to find the right balance of honesty and privacy. Catherine wanted to be truthful about facing a health challenge while also protecting her children from too much public attention during an already difficult time. The weight of their decision was enormous. They knew that once they released the statement, their lives would change dramatically. The media attention would be intense. Public sympathy would pour in, but so would speculation and intrusion. Yet Catherine felt strongly that transparency was the right path forward. As William watched his wife struggle with these decisions, he was reminded of why he had fallen in love with her all those years ago. Her compassion, her sense of duty, her desire to use their platform to help others. These qualities had drawn him to her and continued to inspire him every day. Even while facing her own challenges, She was thinking about how her experience might help other families going through similar situations. The next morning brought a flurry of meetings with palace staff, doctors, and communications teams. Everyone was supportive and professional, but Catherine could feel the shift in how people looked at her. There was a new gentleness, a careful concern that she wasn't used to. She had always been seen as capable and strong, and this new dynamic felt strange and uncomfortable. William noticed his wife's discomfort and made sure to treat her exactly as he always had. During their private moments, he continued to joke with her, seek her advice on royal matters, and include her in decisions about their family's future. He understood that maintaining normalcy in their relationship was crucial for both of them during this uncertain time. As the day ended, they both knew that tomorrow would bring the public announcement that would change everything. Catherine felt a mixture of fear and relief, fear of the unknown ahead, but relief that they would no longer have to carry this burden alone. Their family, their staff, and eventually the public would all be part of this journey with them. The morning of the announcement arrived with an unusual stillness at Kensington Palace. Catherine woke before dawn, unable to sleep, and found herself standing in the nursery where she had spent countless hours with each of her children. The room held so many precious memories, late-night feedings, bedtime stories, quiet moments of just watching them sleep. Now everything felt uncertain. William found her there just as the first hints of sunrise began to appear. Without speaking, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the world wake up. In a few hours, that same world would know about their private struggle, and their lives would never quite be the same. "I keep thinking about my mother-in-law," Catherine whispered, "how she managed to be so strong for everyone else while dealing with her own pain. I don't know if I have that kind of courage." William turned her to face him. "You have your own kind of courage, Kate. You've shown it every day since we've been together. Today won't be any different." The children were still sleeping when the couple made their way to the breakfast room. They had decided to tell George, Charlotte, and Louis about the situation after school, giving them a full day of normalcy before their lives became more complicated. Catherine worried most about George, their eldest, who at 11 was beginning to understand the weight of royal responsibility and public attention. The communications team arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, led by their private secretary and the palace's head of media relations. They had prepared multiple versions of the statement, each crafted to convey the right tone of openness while maintaining appropriate privacy boundaries. Catherine read through each version carefully, making small adjustments to ensure the words felt authentically hers. "I want people to understand that this isn't just about me," she explained to the team. "This is about every family that faces unexpected challenges. If we can show that it's possible to be strong while also being vulnerable, maybe that will help someone else." The statement was released at noon, precisely when they had planned. Within minutes, the palace switchboard was flooded with calls from journalists around the world. News organizations interrupted their regular programming to report the announcement. Social media exploded with messages of support, speculation, and concern. Catherine and William retreated to a private sitting room to monitor the initial reaction. They watched as news anchors shared the statement with viewers, noting the careful balance between transparency and privacy. Most of the coverage was respectful and supportive, focusing on Catherine's dedicated service to the country and wishing her a speedy recovery. But there were also the inevitable critics and conspiracy theorists who questioned every word of the statement. Some suggested the timing was suspicious, others wondered if there was more to the story than what had been shared. Catherine tried not to read the negative comments, but in the digital age, it was almost impossible to avoid them entirely. "This is exactly why we were hesitant to say anything," William said, scrolling through some of the more outrageous theories being shared online. "People can't just accept that sometimes life throws unexpected challenges at everyone, including us." The support, however, far outweighed the criticism. Messages poured in from other royal families around the world, political leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens who wanted to share their own experiences with similar health challenges. Many thanked Catherine for being open about her situation, saying it made them feel less alone in their own struggles. One message that particularly moved Catherine came from a mother in Manchester who had faced a similar diagnosis 2 years earlier. She wrote about how isolated she had felt, how worried she was about her children, and how seeing someone in the public eye acknowledge these same fears made her realize that her feelings were completely normal and valid. "This is why we made the right decision," Catherine told William, wiping away tears as she read message after message from people sharing their own stories. "If our honesty can help even one family feel less alone, then dealing with the public attention will be worth it." The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to Kensington Palace. King Charles arrived first, bringing flowers from his garden and a handwritten note expressing his pride in Catherine's courage. Queen Camilla came with homemade soup and practical advice about managing recovery while maintaining family routines. Catherine's parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, drove up from Berkshire with their arms full of the children's favorite books and games. They had immediately cleared their schedules to provide whatever support was needed. Carol in particular understood the unique challenges her daughter faced as a mother in the public eye, dealing with health concerns. "When you were little and got sick, I could just focus on taking care of you," Carol told Catherine as they sat together in the garden. "But you're handling something much more complex. I'm so proud of how you're managing all of this." The most difficult conversation came when the children returned from school. Catherine and William had prepared carefully for this moment, consulting with child psychologists about the best way to explain the situation without causing unnecessary worry. They gathered in the family living room, the same space where they had shared so many happy moments together. George sat between his parents on the sofa, while Charlotte and Louis curled up in the armchairs nearby. The room felt both familiar and different, as if this conversation would mark a before and after in their family story. "We need to talk to you about something important," William began, his voice steady but gentle. "Mummy isn't feeling well and she needs to have an operation to help her get better." The questions came immediately, as they had expected. Charlotte wanted to know if Mummy would still be able to read bedtime stories. Louis asked if this meant they couldn't play in the garden anymore. George, more mature than his siblings, asked the question that worried him most. "Will the newspapers write mean things about our family?" Catherine's heart broke a little at her eldest son's concern. At 11, George was already aware of the intense public interest in their family, but she had hoped to shield him from the harsher realities for a few more years. "Some people might write things that aren't very kind," Catherine answered honestly. "But most people care about our family and want to help us. The important thing is that we have each other, and we have so many people who love us." As the evening progressed, the children seemed to adapt to the news with the resilience that young people often show. They asked practical questions about schedules and routines, worried about their pets, and wanted assurance that their parents would still be there for important events like school plays and sports matches. That night, after the children were asleep, Catherine and William sat together reviewing the day. The public response had been more positive than they had dared to hope, but they both knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. The surgery was still weeks away, and the recovery period would bring its own challenges. "I feel like we've crossed a bridge today," Catherine said, leaning against William's shoulder. "There's no going back to the way things were before, but maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe being more open about our struggles will help us connect with people in a deeper way." 3 weeks had passed since the announcement, and Catherine found herself living in a strange new reality. The outpouring of support from around the world had been overwhelming in the most beautiful way. Thousands of letters arrived daily at Kensington Palace, each one carefully read by staff members who shared the most touching messages with Catherine and William. One particular morning, Catherine sat in her favorite chair by the window, reading through a collection of letters that had been selected for her review. There was one from an 8-year-old girl in Wales who had drawn a picture of Catherine as a superhero, complete with a cape that read "Brave Princess." Another came from a grandmother in Scotland who shared her own story of facing surgery while caring for young grandchildren, offering practical advice about managing fear and maintaining hope. "Listen to this one," Catherine called to William, who was working at his desk nearby. She read aloud from a letter written by a woman in her 30s, who had been diagnosed with a similar condition the previous year. The woman wrote about how isolating the experience had been until she heard Catherine's announcement, which made her realize that even princesses face unexpected health challenges and moments of vulnerability. William looked up from his work, struck by the emotion in his wife's voice. Over the past few weeks, he had watched Catherine process not just her own diagnosis and upcoming surgery, but also the profound impact their openness was having on others. It was clear that receiving these letters was both healing and overwhelming for her. The couple had made several adjustments to their daily routine during this waiting period. Catherine had stepped back from most of her public engagements, though she continued to work behind the scenes on her early childhood development projects. William had taken on additional responsibilities, covering some of her scheduled appearances while maintaining his own full calendar of duties. Their children had adapted remarkably well to the changes in their household. George had become more protective of his mother, often checking to make sure she was feeling all right and offering to help with small tasks around the house. Charlotte had taken on a nurturing role with her younger brother Louis, reading to him more often and including him in her games. Louis, at 6 years old, seemed to sense that something important was happening but remained his cheerful, energetic self. The family had developed new traditions during this time of uncertainty. Every evening after dinner, they would take a walk through the palace gardens together, regardless of the weather. These walks became sacred time where they could talk openly about their feelings, share funny stories from their day, or simply enjoy each other's company without the pressure of royal duties or media attention. During one particularly meaningful walk, Charlotte asked her mother if being scared was the same as being weak. The question caught Catherine off guard, and she realized her daughter had been thinking deeply about the situation at home. Being scared is completely normal. Sweetheart, Catherine explained, kneeling down to Charlotte's eye level, even grown-ups get scared sometimes. What makes someone brave isn't the absence of fear, but doing what needs to be done even when you're frightened. William watched this exchange with deep admiration for his wife. Despite facing her own fears about the upcoming surgery and recovery, she continued to be the steady, wise mother their children needed. Her ability to turn their family's challenge into a teachable moment about courage and resilience reminded him why he had fallen in love with her all those years ago. The palace staff had also rallied around the family in remarkable ways. Their longtime housekeeper, Maria, had quietly taken on additional responsibilities, anticipating needs before they were expressed and creating an atmosphere of calm efficiency throughout their living quarters. Their security team had worked with local hospitals to ensure Catherine's privacy would be protected during her medical appointments, while their communications staff managed the ongoing media interest with professionalism and discretion. One afternoon, Catherine received an unexpected visitor. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, arrived with a thermos of homemade soup and a warm smile. As someone who had faced her own health challenges in the public eye, Sarah understood the unique pressures Catherine was experiencing. The hardest part isn't the surgery itself, Sarah shared as they sat together in the garden. It's the feeling that everyone is watching and waiting, that your private medical situation has become public property. But you're handling it with such grace, Catherine. You're showing people that it's possible to be both vulnerable and strong. Their conversation lasted for hours, covering everything from practical concerns about recovery to deeper questions about how to maintain authenticity while living under constant public scrutiny. Sarah's visit reminded Catherine that she wasn't alone in navigating the complex intersection of personal challenges and public responsibility. As the surgery date approached, Catherine found herself thinking more and more about the legacy she wanted to leave through her work. The response to her health announcement had shown her that people were hungry for authentic leadership, for public figures who were willing to acknowledge that life doesn't always go according to plan. I've been thinking about starting a new initiative. When I'm recovered, she told William one evening as they reviewed her upcoming medical schedule. Something focused on supporting families through unexpected challenges. Not just health issues, but job loss, divorce, grief, all the things that can turn a family's world upside down. William wasn't surprised by this idea. Throughout their marriage, Catherine had consistently found ways to turn their personal experiences into opportunities to serve others. When she had struggled with morning sickness during her pregnancies, she had become an advocate for better support for women with hyperemesis gravidarum. When they had faced challenges as new parents, she had focused her royal work on early childhood development. You always find a way to transform our struggles into service, William observed. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The week before the surgery brought a mix of practical preparations and emotional conversations. Catherine worked with her team to ensure her ongoing projects would continue smoothly in her absence. She recorded several video messages for organizations she supported, wanting to maintain connection with causes close to her heart, even while focusing on recovery. She also spent individual time with each of her children, creating special memories and reassuring them about the upcoming separation. With George, she worked on a puzzle that they planned to finish together after her surgery. With Charlotte, she planted seeds in small pots that they would tend together during recovery. With Louis, she created a countdown calendar decorated with stickers, helping him visualize when Mummy would be coming home. The most emotional moment came during a quiet dinner with just her immediate family. As they sat around their kitchen table, sharing stories and laughing together, Catherine felt overwhelmed by gratitude for these precious, ordinary moments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and uncertainties, but tonight they were simply a family sharing a meal and enjoying each other's company. Whatever happens in the coming weeks, Catherine said, looking around the table at the faces of the people she loved most, I want you all to know that you are my greatest achievement and my deepest joy. Everything else we've built together, our work, our service, our public life, it's all meaningful because we've built it as a family. The evening ended with their traditional family walk through the gardens, this time under a sky full of stars. As they walked, William reached for Catherine's hand and she felt a deep sense of peace despite the uncertainty ahead. Whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, they would face them together just as they always had. The morning of the surgery arrived with surprising calm. Catherine had expected to wake up anxious and fearful, but instead she felt a sense of quiet determination. She had done everything possible to prepare, medically, emotionally, and practically. Now it was time to trust in the skilled medical team and focus on the healing that lay ahead. William had barely slept, spending most of the night sitting in the chair beside their bed, watching Catherine rest peacefully. As dawn broke, he marveled at her serenity. Throughout their years together, he had seen her face countless challenging situations with grace, but this morning she seemed to possess an almost ethereal strength that took his breath away. The children had said their goodbyes the evening before, following the advice of child psychologists, who suggested that morning farewells could be more traumatic. George had given his mother a handmade bracelet with beads spelling out brave, while Charlotte had written a poem about how much she loved her mummy. Louis had simply climbed into Catherine's lap and stayed there for an hour, as if his presence alone could provide protection. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Catherine took one last walk through their private quarters. She touched the photographs on the mantel, ran her fingers along the spines of books in their library, and stood quietly in each of her children's bedrooms. These familiar spaces had been her sanctuary, and she wanted to carry their comfort with her. The drive to the hospital was conducted with the utmost discretion. Their security team had worked with hospital administrators to ensure Catherine could enter through a private entrance, away from any potential media attention. Despite the careful planning, Catherine noticed several photographers with long lenses positioned at various points along their route. The public interest in her situation remained intense, even during these most private moments. At the hospital, they were greeted by the surgical team that Catherine had met with several times during the preceding weeks. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the lead surgeon, had impressed both Catherine and William with her expertise and her gentle manner. She had taken time to explain every aspect of the procedure, answering questions with patience and thoroughness that helped ease their concerns. "How are you feeling this morning, Your Royal Highness?" Dr. Morrison asked as they settled into the preoperative room. "Ready?" Catherine replied simply, and she meant it. The weeks of waiting and worrying were over. Now she could focus on the work of healing. William stayed by Catherine's side through all the pre-surgery preparations. He held her hand during the IV insertion, made gentle conversation during the waiting periods, and provided the steady presence that had anchored their relationship for over a decade. The medical staff were impressed by their obvious devotion to each other, commenting quietly among themselves about the genuine love evident between the couple. As the time for surgery approached, Catherine and William had a few private moments alone. The hospital room felt sterile and unfamiliar, so different from their warm, comfortable life at home. But as they looked at each other, the setting seemed to fade away, leaving only their connection and commitment to each other. "I'll be right here when you wake up," William promised, kissing her forehead gently. "I know you will," Catherine replied. You always have been. The surgery lasted longer than expected, though well within the normal range for the procedure. William spent the time in a private waiting area, accompanied by Catherine's parents who had arrived early that morning. Carol Middleton brought knitting to keep her hands busy, while Michael paced quietly near the windows. King Charles called every hour for updates, and Princess Anne sent flowers with a note that simply read, "Thinking of you all." During the long hours of waiting, William found himself reflecting on their journey together. From university students to young marrieds to parents to senior members of the royal family, each phase had brought its own challenges and joys. This health scare felt like another transition, another test of their resilience and commitment to each other. He thought about their wedding day, when Catherine had walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey with such confidence and grace. He remembered the birth of each of their children, how Catherine had embraced motherhood with joy and dedication despite the intense public scrutiny. He recalled countless royal engagements where she had connected with people from all walks of life, using her platform to shine light on important causes and forgotten communities. When Dr. Morrison finally appeared in the waiting room, William felt his heart stop for a moment. But her smile immediately told him everything he needed to know. "The surgery went very well," she announced. "Everything we found was exactly what we expected based on the preoperative tests. Her Royal Highness should make a complete recovery with no long-term complications." The relief in the room was palpable. Carol began to cry quietly, while Michael wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders. William felt his knees go weak with gratitude and had to sit down for a moment to process the good news. "When can I see her?" he asked. "She's in recovery now, but you should be able to go in within the hour," Dr. Morrison explained. "She'll be groggy from the anesthesia, but she should recognize you and be able to speak briefly." Those 60 minutes felt like the longest hour of William's life. He called King Charles with the good news, spoke briefly with the children who were at school, and sent messages to the small circle of family and friends who had been anxiously waiting for updates. When he was finally allowed into the recovery room, Catherine looked small and pale against the white hospital sheets, but she was awake and alert. When she saw him, her face broke into the smile he had loved for over 20 years. "How do you feel?" he asked, taking her hand carefully. "Like I've been hit by a truck," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the anesthesia. "But grateful, so grateful it's over." They spent the next few minutes in comfortable silence, simply being together after the ordeal of separation and uncertainty. Catherine drifted in and out of sleep, but each time she woke, she squeezed William's hand to make sure he was still there. As evening approached and Catherine became more alert, they began to talk about the messages of support that had poured in throughout the day. The palace communications team had prepared a brief statement confirming that the surgery had been successful, and the response from the public had been overwhelming positive. "I received a call from the Prime Minister," William told her, "and your patronages have all sent flowers. But the most touching messages came from ordinary families who wanted you to know they were thinking of you today." Catherine smiled weakly, but with genuine warmth. "That means everything to me. Knowing that our openness about this experience might help other families feel less alone makes all of this worthwhile." As the day ended, William prepared to spend the night in Catherine's hospital room. The nursing staff had provided a comfortable chair that converted into a bed, and he had no intention of leaving his wife's side during her first night of recovery. "You should go home to the children," Catherine protested gently. "The children are fine with your parents," William replied. "My place is here with you." As Catherine drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by flowers from well-wishers around the world and with her husband keeping vigil beside her bed, she felt overwhelmed by gratitude. The surgery was behind her, the prognosis was excellent, and the love surrounding her felt like a protective embrace that would carry her through whatever challenges lay ahead. 2 weeks into Catherine's recovery at home, the reality of healing had settled into their daily routine like an unexpected house guest. The initial relief of successful surgery had given way to the slower, more challenging work of rebuilding strength and adjusting to temporary limitations. Catherine found herself frustrated by her body's need for rest when her mind was eager to return to normal activities. The mornings were the hardest. Catherine had always been an early riser, someone who greeted each day with energy and purpose. Now she woke up feeling heavy and tired, needing extra time just to get out of bed. William had adjusted his schedule to be present for these difficult moments, bringing her tea and sitting quietly while she gathered the strength to face another day of recovery. "I feel like I'm failing everyone," Catherine confided to William one particularly challenging morning. "There are so many people counting on me, so many projects that need attention, and I can barely manage to get dressed without feeling exhausted." William set down his coffee cup and moved closer to his wife. Over the past weeks, he had learned to recognize the signs of her frustration and self-criticism. The woman who had spent over a decade serving others with tireless dedication was struggling to accept that she needed to focus on serving herself for a while. "You're not failing anyone," he said gently. "You're doing exactly what you need to do to get better. The organizations you support understand that. The people who love you want you to take this time to heal properly." Their children had become unexpected sources of wisdom during this recovery period. George, now fully aware of his mother's situation, had taken on small responsibilities around the house with remarkable maturity. He helped his younger siblings with homework, made sure Louis brushed his teeth properly, and even attempted to make breakfast one morning, resulting in a kitchen disaster that had everyone laughing for the first time in days. Charlotte had appointed herself as her mother's chief entertainment officer, creating elaborate puppet shows and fashion presentations to brighten Catherine's spirits during long afternoons of mandated rest. Her creativity and determination to make her mother smile reminded everyone that healing involved not just physical recovery, but emotional restoration as well. Louis, with the resilience of childhood, had adapted to the new routine with remarkable ease. He would climb into bed with Catherine each morning for cuddles, chattering about his dreams and plans for the day. His innocent joy and physical affection provided a healing balm that no medicine could replicate. The support from extended family had been constant and meaningful. Catherine's parents had essentially moved into Kensington Palace during the first week of recovery, taking over household management and childcare duties with the kind of seamless efficiency that only comes from deep love and understanding. Carol had anticipated needs before they were expressed, while Michael had provided steady emotional support and gentle humor when spirits flagged. King Charles visited regularly, often bringing books from his personal library that he thought Catherine might enjoy during her recovery. His selections revealed a thoughtful understanding of his daughter-in-law's interests: biographies of remarkable women, books about gardening and nature, and collections of poetry that spoke to resilience and hope. Princess Anne had surprised everyone with her practical contributions to Catherine's recovery. She arrived one afternoon with homemade soup, fresh bread, and a no-nonsense attitude that seemed to energize the entire household. Her visit reminded Catherine that strength came in many forms, and that accepting help was itself a form of courage. The messages from the public continued to arrive in overwhelming numbers. Palace staff had established a system for categorizing and responding to the correspondence, but they made sure Catherine saw a selection of the most meaningful letters each day. Many were from people sharing their own recovery stories, offering practical advice and emotional encouragement that proved invaluable. One letter that particularly moved Catherine came from a teacher in Liverpool who had been following her early childhood development work for years. The teacher wrote about implementing Catherine's ideas in her classroom and seeing remarkable results with children from challenging backgrounds. She wanted Catherine to know that her work was continuing to make a difference even while she recovered, carried forward by the many people she had inspired and educated. "This is what I needed to hear today," Catherine told William after reading the teacher's letter. "Sometimes I forget that the work we do creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see directly. Even when I'm not actively engaged, the ideas and programs we've developed continue to help people." As the weeks of recovery progressed, Catherine began to find a new rhythm that honored both her need for rest and her desire to contribute meaningfully to the world around her. She started holding virtual meetings with her staff, participating in planning sessions for future projects while still prioritizing her physical healing. One particularly meaningful project that emerged during her recovery was a collaboration with several medical charities to create resources for families facing similar health challenges. Catherine's experience had given her first-hand insight into the fears, practical concerns, and emotional needs that arise when a family member requires surgery and extended recovery time. "I want to create something that would have helped us during those first difficult weeks," Renee explained to her team during one of their virtual meetings. information about how to talk to children about medical procedures, resources for managing household responsibilities when one parent is recovering, support for the emotional challenges that come with unexpected health issues. The project energized Catherine in a way that surprised everyone, including herself. Working on something directly connected to her recent experience felt healing and purposeful. She was transforming her own vulnerability into a tool for helping others, continuing the pattern of service that had defined her royal role from the beginning. William watched his wife's engagement with this new project with deep admiration and some concern. He loved seeing her passion and energy return, but he also worried that she might push herself too hard too quickly. Finding the balance between supporting her need to contribute and protecting her need to heal completely became one of his primary focuses. One evening, as they sat together in their garden watching the children play, Catherine reflected on how much their family had grown and changed through this experience. "I used to think that showing strength meant never letting people see you struggle," she told William, "but I'm learning that real strength might actually be about being honest when things are difficult, accepting help when you need it, and trusting that the people who love you will still love you when you're not at your best." William nodded, understanding that his wife was processing not just her physical recovery, but a fundamental shift in her understanding of leadership and service. The woman who had always been so careful to present a polished, capable public image was learning to embrace a more authentic and vulnerable approach to her role. As the sun set over their garden that evening, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of peace with the present moment. She wasn't fully recovered yet, and there were still challenges ahead, but she was beginning to trust that this experience was leading their family towards something new and meaningful. The tears that had marked the beginning of this journey were giving way to a different kind of emotion: gratitude for lessons learned and relationships deepened through shared struggle. 6 months had passed since that frightening morning when Catherine first received her diagnosis, and the transformation in their family was remarkable. What had begun as a crisis had evolved into an unexpected gift of deeper understanding, stronger relationships, and renewed purpose. Catherine stood in her study, now fully recovered and energized, preparing for what would be her first major public appearance since the surgery. The event was particularly
meaningful because it was the launch of the new
family support initiative that had grown out of her recovery experience. Working with medical professionals, social workers, and families who had faced similar challenges, Catherine had helped create a comprehensive program, providing practical and emotional support for families dealing with unexpected health crises. "Are you nervous?" William asked, adjusting his tie as he prepared to join her for the launch event. Catherine considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she would have been anxious about returning to the public eye, worried about whether people would see her differently or treat her with the kind of careful concern she had found so uncomfortable during her recovery. But now she felt something different: excitement about sharing what their family had learned and confidence in her ability to help others navigate similar challenges. "Not nervous," she replied. "Eager. I feel like I have something important to say now, something that comes from real experience rather than just good intentions." The launch event was held at a community center in East London, the same area where Catherine had done some of her earliest royal work over a decade ago. The venue was filled with families who had participated in developing the new program, medical professionals who had contributed their expertise, and representatives from the various organizations that would help implement the initiative nationwide. As Catherine entered the room, the response was immediate and emotional. The applause went on for several minutes, but it wasn't the polite, formal acknowledgement she was accustomed to receiving at royal events. This was something deeper: recognition from people who understood what she had been through and appreciation for her willingness to transform personal struggle into public service. During her speech, Catherine spoke more personally than she ever had in a public setting. She talked about the fear she had felt reading her diagnosis, the challenge of explaining the situation to her children, and the unexpected gifts that had emerged from what initially seemed like only a crisis. "I learned that vulnerability is not weakness," she said, looking directly at the families gathered before her. "I learned that accepting help is not failure, and I learned that our most difficult experiences can become our most powerful tools for helping others, but only if we're brave enough to share them honestly." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Many people were wiping away tears, not from sadness but from the relief of hearing their own experiences, reflected and validated by someone they respected. One of the most powerful moments came when Catherine invited several families to share their own stories. A father from Birmingham talked about the isolation he felt when his wife needed emergency surgery, leaving him to manage 3 young children while processing his own fear and worry. A single mother from Cardiff described the financial stress that complicated her recovery when she couldn't work for several months after her procedure. Each story reinforced Catherine's belief that families needed more than just medical care during health crises. They needed emotional support, practical assistance, and the knowledge that they weren't alone in their struggles. The program she was launching aimed to address all of these needs through a network of trained volunteers, professional counselors, and online resources. As the event concluded, Catherine was approached by dozens of people wanting to share their own experiences and thank her for speaking so openly about her journey. One conversation particularly moved her, with a teenage girl whose mother had faced a similar health challenge the previous year. "Before today, I thought we were the only family that felt so scared and confused," the girl said. "Hearing you talk about it makes me realize that what we went through was normal, and that we handled it pretty well considering how hard it was." Driving home from the event, Catherine and William reflected on how much their understanding of their royal role had evolved through this experience. They had always taken their responsibilities seriously, but now they understood more deeply how their personal experiences could be transformed into meaningful service. "I used to think that our job was to be perfect examples of strength and composure," Catherine said as they passed through the familiar streets of London. "But I'm beginning to think our real job might be to show people that it's possible to face difficult things with grace and come out stronger on the other side." That evening, they gathered as a family for their traditional after-dinner walk through the palace gardens. It was something they had started during Catherine's recovery and continued even after she was fully healed. These walks had become sacred time for their family, a daily reminder of what truly mattered. George, now 12 and increasingly aware of his future responsibilities, asked his mother if she was glad that she had gotten sick. It was a startling question that made both parents pause. "I'm not glad I got sick," Catherine replied thoughtfully, "but I am grateful for what we learned about ourselves and each other through that experience. Sometimes difficult things teach us lessons we couldn't learn any other way." Charlotte, ever the practical one, wanted to know if their family would face other scary challenges in the future. It was the kind of question that revealed how much their children had matured through the experience of watching their parents navigate uncertainty with honesty and courage. "Probably," William answered honestly. "Life brings unexpected challenges to every family, but we've learned that we can handle difficult things together, and that there are always people ready to help us if we're brave enough to ask for it." Louis, now 7 and full of questions about everything, wondered if other families knew how to be brave like theirs. His innocent query sparked a conversation about how their family's experience could help other children and parents feel less alone when facing their own challenges. As they walked that evening, Catherine felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey they had traveled together. The fear and uncertainty of 6 months ago seemed like experiences from another lifetime, transformed by healing, growth, and a deeper understanding of what really mattered. The initiative launched that day would go on to help thousands of families, but Catherine knew its most important impact had already occurred within their own home. Their children had learned that adults sometimes face scary situations and that it's okay to feel frightened as long as you face your fears, with the support of people who love. William had discovered new depths of his own, strength and capacity for caregiving, qualities that would serve him well in his future role as king. And Catherine had found her authentic voice as a public figure, understanding finally that her greatest service came not from projecting perfection, but from sharing the wisdom gained through genuine struggle. That night, as they tucked their children into bed, Catherine and William exchanged a look that carried the weight of everything they had experienced together. The tears that had marked the beginning of their journey had long since dried, replaced by something more lasting, a deep appreciation for their family's resilience and an unshakable confidence in their ability to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The nation that had watched their journey with concern and Support had witnessed something remarkable. A royal family choosing vulnerability over perfection, authentic service over polished performance. In sharing their struggles honestly, they had not diminished their standing, but had instead created a new model of leadership based on genuine human connection and shared experience. As Catherine turned off the lights and settled into bed beside William, she reflected on how a moment of fear and uncertainty had ultimately led to some of the most meaningful work of their lives. Their tear-filled moment had indeed resounded in the heart of the nation, creating ripples of connection, understanding, and hope that would continue long after the immediate crisis had passed.